Stuck in an elevator with her boss, she decides to expose her thoughts. The next day, he calls her into his office, and something unbelievable happens. If you love dramas, stay until the end. But first, don't forget to subscribe and like the video. GA always dreamed of growing professionally and doing something meaningful with her career. Ever since she graduated in business administration, she longed to work at a prestigious company where she could prove her value and make a difference. However, the reality she encountered upon joining Hanul Corp was far different from what she imagined. She spent most of her time doing monotonous tasks, constantly overlooked and often underestimated. Her office assistant role was simple, but GA always maintained a resilient spirit, facing everything with a dose of optimism. One day, Hanul Corp hosts a company party to celebrate a new deal. For GA, the event is just another obligatory commitment, and she has no great expectations. She observes her colleagues vying for the attention of the important executives, which makes her feel even more out of place. Still, she cheers up when she spots a few friends from her department, with whom she shares a few jokes about the competitive atmosphere and the company's mysterious figures. During the party, Hanul Corporate's CEO, Lee Min-jun, arrives with his usual serious demeanor and penetrating gaze. Min-jun is known for his competence and dedication to work, but also for his distant personality. At 33, he commands the company with impressive skill, but his coldness and excessive focus on results make him seem like a man without feelings. Min-jun doesn't mingle with other employees. He watches the event from afar, speaking only with a few directors before deciding to leave for a meeting. GA, who tries to leave early to avoid any incidents, ends up tripping and spilling a glass of wine on her dress. Uncomfortable and embarrassed, she rushes to the restroom to clean up, but the stain on her dress is impossible to remove. Exhausted and frustrated, she decides to exit through the staff entrance to avoid crossing paths with any executives and prevent further embarrassment. While waiting for the elevator, Min-jun also appears in the hallway, heading for the elevator with his usual impassive expression and impeccable posture. As he enters the elevator, he barely notices GA, who tries her best to remain invisible. Once the doors close, the elevator shakes and suddenly stops mid-floor, jamming with a slight power flicker. The awkward silence between them is broken by GA, who tries to mask her nervousness with a light comment about the elevator. Min-jun keeps his serious expression and watches the control panel, pressing buttons to no avail. Time passes, and with no alternatives, they end up having to wait for maintenance, which informs them over the intercom that the rescue may take over an hour. As time passes, GA, who initially avoided any conversation, begins to feel uncomfortable with the crushing silence. She shyly comments on how exhausting the routine can be, mentioning the long working hours and the lack of opportunities for those in lower positions. Min-jun initially just listens without reacting, but something in her words begins to capture his attention. He realizes that GA is not just any employee. Her words carry authenticity and an honest view on the difficulty of moving up within the company. Surprised by GA's sincerity, Min-jun decides to respond, something rare for him, and the conversation deepens unexpectedly. He reveals that the path to success isn't always as satisfying as it seems. GA is shocked by his honesty, especially seeing a vulnerability that makes him seem human, a side opposite to the CEO everyone fears and respects. They share thoughts on the pressures of success and the demands placed on them, and in that moment, Min-jun seems to let down his facade, showing a softer and more approachable side. After almost an hour, the maintenance team finally manages to unlock the elevator. Before leaving, GA thanks them for the conversation with a slight bow, still surprised by what happened. Min-jun watches her in silence, but he no longer has the cold smile he had before. There is something different in his gaze, a spark of curiosity for the first time. He realizes that that night has left its mark on him in some way, and when he returns to the office the next day, his thoughts return to the encounter in the elevator. Something unusual for him. The morning after the elevator incident, GA is still in disbelief. As a nearly invisible assistant in the eyes of her superiors, she never imagined she'd have such an open and personal conversation with the CEO himself. The memory of that exchange lingers in her mind, but she forces herself to focus on her daily routine and responsibilities. After all, how could she believe that night would have any impact on someone like Lee Min-jun? For Min-jun, however, the experience was equally unexpected. That moment in the elevator had introduced him to something rare. Someone unafraid to express their difficulties and frustrations with sincerity. Though he tries to dismiss it, the strategist in him can't help but consider what he learned. Reflecting on how difficult it is to trust those around him, especially in upper management where interests and manipulations abound, Min-jun realizes he may need someone close whom he can actually rely on. And to his own surprise, G.A.'s image comes to mind. He decides to take an unexpected step. That afternoon, as G.A. is deeply focused on organizing files and completing reports, her supervisor calls her over. "The CEO wants to see you in his office," he says, sounding as shocked as she feels. "The CEO?" she repeats, trying to mask her panic. Walking down the long corridor toward Min-jun's luxurious office, her heart races faster with each step. Upon entering, she is met by his imposing presence, observing her with that usual, unreadable look, though today, a touch of curiosity flickers there. He invites her to sit, and G.A., still nervous, sits across from him. What happens next will change her life in ways she could never imagine. In a firm voice, Min-jun gets straight to the point. He reveals that he's decided to assign her to a new position, his personal assistant, a role of high trust, demanding, and extremely close to him. G.A. can barely believe what she's hearing. Min-jun, noticing her surprise, clarifies that he's looking for someone who brings a genuine perspective and doesn't shy away from challenges. In the elevator, he says calmly, "I saw that you're someone who speaks your mind and doesn't hide your opinions. That's rare here." The offer seems surreal to G.A., who's still trying to figure out if this is a dream. After a brief moment of hesitation, she accepts the challenge, though uncertain about what lies ahead. Min-jun explains the responsibilities and the level of discretion the position will require. He doesn't need an assistant merely to schedule meetings or organize documents. He needs someone who understands his decisions, who can help him handle daily pressures, and who can provide honest feedback on issues involving Hanul Corp. Min-jun emphasizes that the role requires more than she might expect and makes it clear that the work will place her under a great deal of pressure. In the following days, G.A. immerses herself in an intense routine, facing the challenges and difficulties of her new role. She accompanies Min-jun to important meetings and has to quickly learn the business dynamics. G.A. feels overwhelmed and intimidated by executives and directors, all experienced and demanding. Many question her presence and competence, seeing her as unfit for a role so close to the CEO. She realizes she'll have to fight to earn the respect of those around her. As she strives to prove herself, G.A. faces Min-jun's strict and demanding approach. He's not the kind of boss who offers praise or gives clear directions. In fact, he constantly challenges her, expecting her to solve problems on her own and to understand his unspoken instructions. The pressure to meet the CEO's expectations is enormous, and there are moments when G.A. wonders if she made the right choice in accepting the position. However, her determination not to disappoint herself, or Min-jun pushes her forward. The relationship between G.A. and Min-jun begins to shift, though subtly. Min-jun starts to observe her with a new sense of respect, analyzing her reactions to challenges. He begins to value her ability to handle pressure and realizes that G.A.E. is not only an efficient assistant, but also someone with surprising willpower. Over time, he encourages her to share her opinions, even in the most tense meetings, something that further impresses the other directors. G.A., despite all the difficulties, feels something inside herself changing. She begins to gain self-confidence, realizing that Min-jun is giving her a unique chance to grow. The role, initially daunting, becomes an opportunity for her to discover abilities she didn't know she possessed. Gradually, she develops an instinct for anticipating the CEO's needs, displaying an efficiency and dedication that surprises even the most skeptical. As Min-jun observes G.A.'s dedication, he feels a slight connection, something he hasn't felt in a long time. For him, trusting someone has always been difficult, but G.A.'s sincerity makes him feel a sense of security he can't ignore. They don't have an easy relationship, In fact, many of their workdays are marked by tension and disagreements. But GA doesn't give up. Despite the exhausting coexistence, she sees in Minjun a man burdened by secrets, and her curiosity to understand what lies behind the cold, authoritarian CEO only grows. One particularly tiring night, GA stays late in the office, finishing an important report. As Minjun passes by her desk on his way out, he notices her dedication. For the first time, he allows himself a gesture of gratitude, offering a word of encouragement and recognizing her efforts. GA, surprised, feels her heart race. That brief moment is enough to ignite a spark of hope and renewed motivation in her. As GA adjusts to her new role, she begins to realize that being so close to Minjun involves an unexpected level of emotional complexity. Days go by, and amid meetings, business dinners, and extended hours at the office, she notices that the CEO everyone knows is merely a mask Minjun wears in front of others. Behind his rigid facade, there's a man carrying silent pain and deeply hidden secrets, and GA, curious and increasingly connected to him, feels compelled to understand what torments him so much. One day, while sorting through old documents in Minjun's office, GA finds an old photograph tucked away in a drawer. In it, a young Minjun stands beside an older man, who seems to be his father, and a young woman with a sorrowful expression. Before she can examine the photo further, Minjun enters the room, catching her by surprise. He shuts the drawer abruptly and stares at her with an expression filled with emotions she can't quite interpret. Realizing she crossed a line, GA apologizes, but something about that photo continues to haunt her. In the days that follow, Minjun's behavior changes. He becomes more withdrawn and almost irritable, avoiding GA and seeming lost in dark thoughts. The tension between them is palpable, and she feels that something in their dynamic is about to change. During a tense meeting with investors, Minjun is challenged to justify a series of changes in the company. Although he remains firm, GA notices a flicker of exhaustion in his eyes. She feels an increasing desire to help, but knows he would never admit weakness or accept help from anyone. That night, after everyone leaves, GA stays behind at the office, concerned about Minjun and the way he seemed more affected than usual. When she sees him rushing to the elevator, she instinctively follows, calling out to him before he can leave. Without thinking twice, she asks if he's okay. Minjun, initially reluctant, looks at her for a few seconds as if weighing what to say. Then, with a heavy sigh, he opens up. "Sometimes I feel that all this weight is too much to bear," he admits in a low voice. GA is surprised by his vulnerability, and at that moment she realizes that Minjun is much more than the untouchable, ruthless CEO. There's a burden from his past that he silently carries, and when he mentions the word family, GA senses that his pain is connected to this. Slowly, he reveals that he inherited Hanul Corp. After the sudden death of his father, a demanding man who expected him to follow in his footsteps flawlessly. Minjun's mother passed away when he was very young, and losing his father left him isolated, taking control of everything almost alone. GA listens with care and compassion, sensing the pain in his words. To her, it's shocking to realize how much Minjun has been deprived of personal choices, molded by the expectations of those around him. She now understands why he's so reserved and self-reliant. He can't allow anyone to see his weaknesses. In the days that follow, GA and Minjun begin to develop a deeper connection. GA's warm and understanding nature becomes an unexpected emotional support for him, and she, in turn, feels that Minjun is a mentor and someone she can trust. She also notices that slowly he begins sharing small details of his personal life, something unimaginable for someone like him. One rainy night, while both are working late at the office, Minjun invites her to dinner. They sit in a small hidden restaurant in the bustling streets of Seoul, where Minjun reveals more about his life and the challenges he faces. During dinner, GA encourages him not to confine himself to his father's legacy and to seek something that truly makes sense to him. "You can be whoever you want, Minjun. You don't have to follow what everyone expects," she says with a gentle and encouraging look. Minjun watches her in silence, admiring the sincerity she always shows, something he rarely finds in those around him. From that moment, the tension between them begins to shift into something deeper. Minjun, who always maintained a professional distance, starts seeing GA as an ally, someone who understands him and sees his human side. However, as their emotional connection strengthens, he feels an inner conflict growing. He knows the business world is dangerous and cruel, and he fears that any involvement with GIA will expose her to difficult and even dangerous situations. Thus, no matter how much his feelings emerge silently, Minjun tries to control himself, keeping their interactions strictly professional. But everything changes when, one afternoon, an old business partner of his family, Kang Ji-hoon, reappears on the scene. Kang is an ambitious and manipulative man who has always harbored envy for the Lee family's success. Knowing Minjun's family history, he decides to use it against him, threatening to expose scandals and secrets of Hanul Corp, unless Minjun helps him with a shady business scheme. Trying to protect the company and his reputation, Minjun keeps GI out of the situation, but she senses that something is wrong. One night, seeing him so somber and distant, GI confronts Minjun, worried and determined to support him. She insists that he share what's happening, and finally, he relents. He explains the situation and the dilemma he faces. Protecting Hanul Corp means risking his own name and integrity. However, he knows that any misstep could destroy investor confidence and expose secrets that they're not prepared to reveal. GIA listens empathetically, and without hesitation, she says she will stand by him, offering her unconditional support. This attitude deeply touches Minjun, who feels torn between protecting her and giving in to his growing feelings for her. Now, he can't ignore her presence in his life, nor how much she means to him. The revelation of his secrets creates a new dynamic between them, more intimate and dangerous. GI feels more involved in his life than she ever imagined. And at the same time, Minjun realizes it's not just a matter of trusting GI. He doesn't want to lose her. From that moment on, the tension between them becomes undeniable, and their repressed feelings begin to surface, threatening to turn what was once merely a relationship of mutual trust into something much deeper and riskier. Minjun now understands that GA has become essential in his life, and that the secrets he tries to keep may not only put his work at risk, but also the future he's secretly beginning to envision with her. The feelings between GA and Minjun become increasingly evident, although both try to resist them. GA battles the emotions that arise whenever she's around him, knowing that falling for her boss, especially someone as complex and burdened as Lee Minjun, is unwise. She fears losing everything she's worked for and compromising the professionalism she's struggled to build. Minjun, on the other hand, feels an even greater conflict. While he longs to be close to GA, he fears exposing her to the dangers surrounding him, particularly now that Kang Ji-hoon has started making new threats. Tension reaches a breaking point when, during a business trip to close an important deal, Minjun and GA end up sharing the same hotel room due to a booking error. Both try to ignore the awkwardness, but their proximity and the silence that fills the room make the air feel heavier. Sitting side by side on the room's sofa, Minjun finally admits to GA that he's been struggling with his own feelings for her. He looks at her deeply, vulnerability shining through, and GA feels her heart race, realizing how much this moment means to him. The silence between them is broken when Minjun leans in slowly, and they share a gentle, intense kiss. It's a moment of pure connection, where all inner conflicts and emotional walls seem to dissolve. However, just after the kiss, reality comes crashing down on them. Minjun, still looking at her, murmurs that they can't continue this, as it would be too dangerous for them both. Though hurt, GA understands his position, and they both decide to maintain an emotional distance, even if it breaks them inside. Back in Seoul, GA tries to focus on work and keep a professional relationship with Minjun, but the daily interactions only make it harder to ignore what happened between them. The exchanged glances and forced closeness in every meeting bring their suppressed feelings back to the surface, and every attempt at emotional distance seems useless. The tension between them starts drawing suspicious looks from colleagues, who notice the discomfort and shared glances between the CEO and his assistant. GA feels increasingly insecure and begins to question whether she's willing to continue sacrificing her feelings for the sake of professionalism. Meanwhile, Min-jun begins to feel the weight of Ji-hoon's constant presence and threats. Kang Ji-hoon, willing to do anything to take down Min-jun, plants spies within the company to monitor the CEO's every move, hoping to uncover something incriminating. He notices the closeness between Min-jun and Ji-ae and decides to use it as a weapon. Ji-hoon plans to leak a false scandal, claiming that Min-jun is favoring Ji-ae because of an alleged romantic relationship. This would not only ruin their reputations, but also put at risk the investors' trust in Hanul Corp. While Ji-ae struggles to keep her distance from Min-jun and avoid gossip, she begins receiving anonymous messages suggesting that her relationship with Min-jun is already known by everyone. The messages threaten her, saying she'll lose her job and that Min-jun's reputation will be ruined if she doesn't stay away from him. Terrified and confused, Ji-ae faces a dilemma. She doesn't know whether to tell Min-jun about the threats or to walk away from him to protect them both. One night, Ji-ae decides to confront Min-jun. She goes to his office, determined to end things to avoid harming him, and reveals the threats she's been receiving. Min-jun listens attentively, his face darkening, and anger flashes in his eyes as he realizes that Ji-hoon has crossed every line by targeting the woman he's determined to protect. In a moment of impulse, Min-jun takes Ji-ae's hand, pulling her close, and tells her he won't let her leave. He promises to face Ji-hoon and resolve the situation, no matter the cost. This promise, however, sets off a series of events that complicate matters even more. The next day, Min-jun convenes a meeting with his board and accuses Ji-hoon of sabotage and espionage. Ji-hoon, ever the tactician, denies all allegations and dares Min-jun to prove them, insinuating that his closeness with Ji-ae is clouding his judgment. Under pressure from the board, Min-jun is forced to keep his distance from Ji-ae and act coldly, which leaves her devastated and confused. Ji-ae tries to understand Min-jun's reasons, but his coldness wounds her deeply. She begins to question whether his feelings are genuine or if he's only pushing her away out of fear of losing his power and position. As Ji-ae tries to withdraw, Min-jun suffers in silence, torn between love and duty. However, what he doesn't know is that Ji-hoon is about to take the next step in his cruel plan. A few days later, a rumor spreads quickly through the halls of Hanul Corp. There are compromising photos of Ji-ae and Min-jun together, taken from angles that suggest an intimate relationship. The scandal explodes, and Ji-ae becomes the target of gossip and critical glances from every employee. She realizes her professional life is being destroyed, and at the same time, she feels utterly alone as Min-jun remains cold and distant. Unable to bear the weight of the rumors and humiliation any longer, Ji-ae decides to quit. She writes a resignation letter and, in a final, painful conversation, hands it to Min-jun, saying she needs to leave to preserve her own dignity. Though Min-jun appears unbothered, he feels a deep anguish watching Ji-ae walk away. He wants to stop her but knows that her presence at Hanul Corp only puts her at greater risk. He accepts the letter, but inside he harbors the desire to protect her, even from afar. After Ji-ae's departure, Min-jun feels an unbearable emptiness. He finally realizes that his feelings for her are far more than simple attraction or admiration. He's in love, but he fears it may be too late to do anything about it. However, he knows he must resolve the situation with Ji-hoon to clear Ji-ae's name and eliminate the threats against her. Driven by his desire to right his wrongs and protect both the company and Ji-ae, he decides to confront Ji-hoon once and for all. In this process, Min-jun dives into an investigation that reveals dark secrets about Hanul Corp and his family's involvement in scandals he never knew about. Now, to clear Ji-ae's name and save the company, he will have to confront the past, face his family's mistakes, and finally free himself from the legacy that binds him. He realizes that his own redemption and the possibility of being with Ji-ae depend on facing these secrets. Determined to win her back and keep her safe, Min-jun decides to fight with everything he has, putting his heart and life on the line. Determined to end Ji-hoon's threat to Hanul Corp, And his own life, Min Jun dives deeply into an intense investigation of the company's past and the shady deals conducted under his father's leadership. He uncovers incriminating documents and evidence of illegal practices in which Ji-hoon was heavily involved and, it seems, was one of the orchestrators. Among the revelations, Min Jun finds contracts indicating financial fraud and bribes to politicians, all carried out to strengthen Hanul Corp's market position and eliminate competitors. Meanwhile, G.A., now away from the company, tries to rebuild her life, but the scandal follows her wherever she goes. The media, fed by rumors and lies spread by Ji-hoon, still views her as an ex-employee entangled in a secret affair with the CEO. She feels humiliated and judged by everyone around her, unable to defend herself or prove her innocence. Her confidence is shattered, and the feeling of abandonment that Min Jun left in her heart remains an open wound. Despite the suffering, G.A. misses Min Jun and the moments they shared. She wonders if he thinks of her and regrets allowing her to be so harshly affected. On a quiet night, she finds herself staring at her phone, drafting messages she'll never send. She knows she needs to move on, but she feels that part of her is still bound to the past, unable to let go of the man who changed her life. Meanwhile, the confrontation between Min Jun and Ji-hoon reaches a breaking point. During a board meeting, Ji-hoon tries to publicly discredit Min Jun, accusing him of being unfit to lead Hanul Corp due to his instability and lack of commitment, implying that he places personal feelings above the company's interests. Min Jun, prepared for the attack, reveals a series of evidence against Ji-hoon, exposing him as the true culprit behind financial manipulations and corporate espionage. The board, shocked, watches as Min Jun presents concrete proof of Ji-hoon's fraud, leaving him speechless. After the meeting, a furious and cornered Ji-hoon threatens Min Jun personally, saying that if he continues, G.A. will be the next victim. He warns that he knows where she lives and that he's capable of going to extreme lengths to ensure he comes out on top. This direct threat against G.I. makes Min Jun's blood boil. For the first time, he realizes how much G.I. means to him and how far he's willing to go to protect her. But he also understands that, to keep her safe, he'll need to make the ultimate sacrifice. With the support of a select group of board members, Min Jun devises a plan to defeat Ji-hoon once and for all, while also ensuring G.A.'s safety in the most secure way possible. By distancing himself from her. He knows that, to eliminate Ji-hoon and save Hanul Corp, he'll need to focus entirely on the company, which requires G.A. to stay as far away from him as possible. Understanding the gravity of the situation, Min Jun meets G.A. one last time, intending to put an end to their relationship for good. He finds her in a discreet cafe, watching her from afar before approaching. When she sees him, her heart races with a mix of painful emotions: anger, longing, and love. However, Min Jun surprises her by saying, coldly, that everything they went through was a mistake and that, for her own good, it's better for them to go their separate ways. G.I., her eyes filled with tears, feels a deep ache hearing his words, but she maintains her composure and replies that she was already moving on. Little does G.A. know that Min Jun's coldness was a painful facade he needed to adopt to protect her. After leaving her, he returns to his mission to ensure Ji-hoon's permanent removal from Hanul Corp. For days, he works tirelessly, without rest, attending meetings and handling legal discussions, gathering more evidence against Ji-hoon. But the absence of G.A. weighs heavily on his heart, driving him to a state of physical and emotional exhaustion. Meanwhile, G.A. struggles to move forward, but the pain and longing make every step difficult. One night, while reviewing some notes from her time at Hanul Corp, she comes across an email from one of Min Jun's contacts, a security guard who had always treated her with respect. The email contains a message that hints Min Jun didn't abandon her by choice, but rather to protect her from something more dangerous. Deciding to investigate for herself, G.I. pieces together clues, using her skills and contacts to uncover the conspiracy. G.I. learns that Ji-hoon wasn't only sabotaging Min Jun, but was also manipulating information and even threatening the integrity of Hanul Corp's assets. She realizes that Min Jun distanced himself from her to shield her from these threats. Now, understanding that Min Jun's sacrifice was for her, G.A. decides to return and fight by his side. She's no longer the fearful assistant who first joined the company. She's a determined woman ready to support the man she loves, even if it means facing danger. The next day, GA bursts into a board meeting with evidence in hand, surprising everyone, including Minjun. She presents the information she uncovered, exposing Ji-hoon's threats and financial manipulations. With courage, she addresses the board, revealing that Ji-hoon is the real threat to Hanwol Corp, and that Minjun has only acted to protect the company and those he cares for. At the end of the meeting, with all the evidence presented, Ji-hoon is officially expelled from Hanwol Corp, and the board agrees to pursue legal action against him. Minjun, astonished and moved, watches GA as she stands up to Ji-hoon with impressive bravery. She defends him to the end, and he finally understands that GA is not only someone who supported him, but is the one person who truly cares about him and would never abandon him. After Ji-hoon leaves, Minjun and GA meet in his office. Without a word, Minjun pulls her into a strong embrace, as if he never wants to let her go again. Both feel the weight of everything they've been through, but also the safety of being together, despite all they've faced. Minjun thanks her for coming back, and GA, with an emotional smile, says she would never leave him. They know that the road ahead will still be full of challenges, but now, united, they feel stronger than ever. Minjun finally realizes that GA's love is unshakable, and GA understands that she's found not only a boss, but the man she chose to love, despite all the risks and dangers. With Ji-hoon finally ousted from Hanwol Corp and peace restored, Minjun and GA feel they can, for the first time, breathe easily. But now, with the danger gone, the question arises of how to rebuild their lives, careers, and relationship after everything they've been through. As a gesture of reconciliation and fresh starts, Minjun offers GA a strategic position at the company, a real opportunity for growth, with fair pay and responsibilities suited to her talent. Although returning to Hanwol Corp is tempting, GA reflects deeply on what she truly wants. With Minjun's support, she decides to follow a new path outside the company. Her personal and professional growth have led her to understand her own worth and what she truly wants to do. They share an honest moment in which Minjun admits he's always known her potential, and that, even if it means letting her go, he'll stand by her and support her. They both smile, touched, realizing that their relationship goes beyond any job or position. This bond, built on trust, respect, and love, has become unbreakable. In the months that follow, GA embarks on a new phase of her life, working at an innovative tech organization where she applies all the experience she gained alongside Minjun. She earns respect and admiration, proving herself to be a dedicated and highly skilled professional. Minjun, in turn, focuses on restructuring Hanwol Corp, removing individuals connected to Ji-hoon and making room for a new generation of ethical, committed leaders. He becomes an even more respected CEO, admired not only for his business acumen, but also for his integrity and authentic leadership. Despite their new routines and challenges, GA and Minjun stay in close contact and grow even closer emotionally. On weekends, they meet in quiet, out-of-the-way places to enjoy precious moments together, away from the pressures of work and the critical eyes of others. These meetings are filled with affection and complicity, and with each encounter, they feel their relationship maturing, filling them with a joy and security they never expected. During one of these meetings, on a chilly autumn evening, Minjun invites GA for a walk under the fallen leaves in the park. When they come upon a small gazebo, he finally expresses all the feelings he's held back throughout their journey. With a gentle smile and a spark in his eyes, he tells her how much she's changed his life, transforming him from a reserved man, uncertain about the future, to someone who finally understands what true love is and the importance of having someone to share life with. "You were my one point of peace and strength during all the chaos," he says, sincerity in his voice. Overwhelmed, GA realizes that every struggle was worth it and that the love they've built is strong enough to face any obstacle. Months later, in a small ceremony for close friends and family, GA and Minjun decide to formalize their relationship. The event is intimate, attended by some of GA's new colleagues and a few of Minjun's trusted friends. The setting is cozy and adorned with cherry blossoms, representing renewal and hope, a perfect symbol for the new beginning they share. The ceremony is simple yet deeply moving, and during their vows, they promise to stand by each other, facing every new challenge together, now free from the secrets and barriers of the past. After the ceremony, Min-jun surprises Ji-ae with a getaway. He takes her to a small house along the coast where they can spend their first days together, away from the pressures and responsibilities of Seoul. To Ji-ae, this gesture is a dream come true, the beginning of a simple, peaceful life filled with love and companionship. Watching the sunset alongside Min-jun, she finally feels she's found a place where she belongs. When they return to Seoul, both resume their routines with renewed enthusiasm. Over time, Ji-ae begins collaborating with Hanil Corp as an external consultant on certain projects, bringing her experience and insights to a professional partnership that benefits them both. Although Min-jun remains a firm and dedicated CEO, he becomes more transparent with his team and less rigid with those around him. Ji-ae's presence in his life has taught him the value of empathy, trust, and loyalty, lessons he incorporates into his leadership, inspiring employees to follow his example. The challenges of the past, rather than becoming traumas, have strengthened Ji-ae and Min-jun. They support each other through tough moments and share the small victories of everyday life. Ji-ae, with her warmth and wisdom, is a source of balance for Min-jun, and he, with his leadership and vision, encourages her to be increasingly confident. Together, they become an admired couple, known not just for their individual successes, but for the unwavering support and love they share. A few years later, Min-jun and Ji-ae decide to expand their family. The arrival of their first child fills them with a happiness they've never experienced before. This new family member symbolizes a fresh chapter, a new beginning that seals the story of overcoming love and loyalty they've built together. They raise their child with values of honesty, courage, and resilience, principles they learned and that shaped them over the years. One sunny afternoon, sitting by the sea where they first decided to start this new phase, Ji-ae and Min-jun watch their child playing in the sand. Ji-ae rests her head on Min-jun's shoulder, and they share a smile filled with tenderness, a smile that reflects the journey they've traveled and the love that has only grown over time. Holding Ji-ae's hand, Min-jun murmurs, "I never imagined I could have all this. You, our family, and such a full life." She smiles back, moved, and replies, "Neither did I, but I know that as long as we're together, nothing else matters. I'll always be by your side." In that moment, they understand that all the suffering, battles, and sacrifices were worth it, as they found what many search for their entire lives: a true love built on trust, respect, and above all, unwavering support. They are ready to face the future together, knowing that with the love they share, no obstacle will be too great. So, what would you do if you were in Ji-ae's shoes? We've all faced moments of tension and difficult choices, right? If you were moved by this story and want to see more engaging stories like this, leave a like and subscribe to the channel. Oh, and share it with someone who also loves dramas. Don't forget to check out the other videos on the channel. There's much more romance and twists waiting for you.